Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into what is arguably the most extreme technical and physiological challenge a human being has ever taken on. We're talking about stepping off a ledge into the stratosphere, literally 120,000 feet above the Earth, right into a near vacuum. It's the absolute extreme of breaking the sound barrier, but doing it completely without the protective shell of an airplane. Just a guy, a suit, and gravity. We're looking at a world record supersonic freefall from space. And sure, it's a story about incredible ambition, but more than that, it's a terrifying split-second survival story against the sheer laws of physics.
Now, I want you to sit with this quote for just a second. There's only one way for the blood to leave your skull, and that's through all the eyeballs. Yeah, that is the grim, horrifying reality of what happens when a human body loses control up there in the upper stratosphere. These were the literal, absolute life-or-death stakes of this free fall. So before we can celebrate the record itself, we've got to unpack the intense science of exactly how close this came to a total disaster and how some pretty unprecedented human ingenuity ended up saving the day.
So, Section 1, the edge of space. Let's start right at the beginning.
Try to imagine the sheer physical burden of this exact moment. You're standing on this tiny little step, literally looking down at the curvature of the Earth, but you are trapped inside a massive, fully pressurized suit. This isn't your standard skydiving gear. This suit is packed with heavy oxygen tanks, life support systems, and these dense thermal layers that are specifically designed to keep your blood from, well, literally boiling in the vacuum of space. Because of all that, you weigh almost twice your normal body weight. And executing a perfect exit in all that gear, it's incredibly difficult, but it's absolutely crucial. Why? Because at 120,000 feet, there is practically zero air density. If you step off that platform and just slightly over-rotate or tumble, there's no air resistance to push against to correct yourself. You can't just spread your arms to stabilize like a normal skydiver. You are totally at the mercy of your launch trajectory, essentially just a heavy stone dropping through a vacuum.
And what's really fascinating here is the massive amount of uncertainty going into this. You'd think, right, with millions of dollars and cutting-edge aerospace physics, they'd know exactly what was going to happen. But they didn't. The leading experts were completely divided before the jump. One half of the scientists looked at the high-altitude data and basically warned, you're going to spin like crazy. Because again, without atmospheric drag, any tiny asymmetry in how you step off is going to compound infinitely into a violent rotation. But then the other half looked at the exact same data and concluded, we don't think anything is going to happen. They theorized that falling straight down through a vacuum would just mean a clean, unimpeded drop. So the jumper had to step off that ledge mentally prepared for a violently chaotic spin, all while desperately hoping that second group of scientists was right.
All right, moving on to Section 2, breaking the sound barrier.
When you look at this timeline, the sheer speed is just staggering. So right after the exit, the first 25 seconds tick by, and it looks like a total success. The exit was clean, everything is perfectly under control. But remember, gravity in a near vacuum is a relentless, unchecked accelerator. With almost zero air friction to slow him down, his speed just skyrockets. Just 9 seconds later, at the 34-second mark, he hits Mach 1. He absolutely shatters the speed of sound. And this was the primary goal of the whole mission, to be the first human to ever break the sound barrier entirely outside of an aircraft. Think about that for a second. He's generating a literal sonic boom, pushing through the shock waves of his own descent, wrapped in nothing but a pressurized suit. He is literally accelerating faster than a bullet fired from a handgun.
Which brings us to Section 3, the death spin. Right at the peak of this historical triumph, everything goes wrong. And the crisis doesn't explode all at once, It escalates insidiously. First, he slowly starts to spin. Then it gets faster. And a flat spin in a near vacuum is uniquely deadly because the lack of atmospheric density makes normal skydiving recovery techniques totally useless. You can't just stick a leg out to catch the wind, there is no wind. And the truly terrifying part? There is zero established protocol for this. No human has ever tested these dynamics before. There's no one in mission control who can radio up and say, hey, do exactly this to fix it. The whole world is watching live, and he is entirely on his own. He tries to move his arms around, hoping to catch whatever minuscule friction exists up there, and for a split second, it actually stops. But then, the spin catches in the exact opposite direction and it ramps up aggressively. It essentially turns him into a human centrifuge.
600 miles per hour. Let's just take a second to really process the violent physical reality of that velocity. He is caught in a rapidly accelerating flat spin while plummeting toward Earth. To put that into perspective, a typical commercial airliner cruises at about 550 to 600 miles per hour. His body is rotating at the speed of a jet engine in flight. It's a level of rotational violence that the human brain and our internal organs simply were not designed to survive.
And this brings us right back to that grisly physiological threat we talked about at the very beginning. In aviation, we talk a lot about G-forces. You know, when you pull up hard in a fighter jet, you might black out because the blood drains from your head down into your legs. But what he's experiencing in this 600-mile-per-hour flat spin is the exact opposite. It's a massive redout. The extreme centrifugal force is pushing negative Gs, driving all of his blood violently backward into his head. Our cardiovascular system is just not built to withstand that kind of pressure. If that rotational force isn't stopped, the pressure builds in the cranium until the blood has only one viable exit route, bursting through the eyeballs. So this specific speed and this specific spin, it is a literal, unavoidable death sentence if it continues for even a few more seconds.
Which leads us into Section 4, Regaining Control.
When technology and physics turn against you, sometimes the only way out is to outsmart the system itself. Now, a crucial point here is understanding this very specific piece of technology called the Chi-Whiz. This was a device attached directly to his wrist, and it was specifically designed as a failsafe to save his life. Its whole job was to sense extreme G-forces and automatically fire a drogue chute. A drogue chute is basically a small, stabilizing parachute that gets deployed to yank a jumper out of a fatal flat spin. But at these supersonic speeds, an automatic drogue deployment is incredibly risky. If that chute fires at the wrong angle or at too high a velocity, the sudden jerk could easily tangle the lines around him, or worse, instantly snap his neck. So, in this incredibly chaotic moment, the automatic safety device suddenly transforms into a mortal threat. It basically became a hurdle he had to beat.
So, watch how he maneuvers through this desperate split-second sequence of physics. To survive on his own terms, he literally has to outsmart the computer on his wrist. He pulls his arms in super tight to his core. By doing this, he fundamentally changes his center of mass and alters his angular momentum. And because the Chi-Whiz sensor is on his wrist, pulling his arms inward reduces the centrifugal radius. He actually tricks the sensor into reading a lower G-force than his body is currently enduring. The device suddenly reads the drop in Gs at the wrist, assumes he's regaining control, and crucially, the automated drogue chute doesn't fire. By manipulating his own physical profile to outsmart his safety equipment, he buys himself the exact crucial seconds he needs. He manually turns his body, fights the extreme physics of the spin, and waits just long enough to hit thicker atmosphere where he can finally regain aerodynamic stability. Honestly, it is an absolute masterpiece of presence of mind under unimaginable pressure.
Okay, let's take a breath as we head into Section 5, Back to Blue Skies.
With stability regained, we can all finally breathe. As the freefall slows down and the atmosphere thickens, the environment completely transforms around him, and aerodynamics actually start working for him again. We see these incredible visual and sensory anchors here. Higher up, as he fell through that pitch-black sky, you could actually see the depressurized fabric of his outer suit wildly flapping in this extreme, hostile environment, all accompanied by the absolute deafening roar of supersonic travel. But as the main parachute finally opens, that harsh, dark vacuum gives way to the bright, comforting blue sky of Earth's lower atmosphere. The violent noise is just completely replaced by the sudden, peaceful quiet of a deployed parachute. It is literally the ultimate visual and auditory representation of safety.
So, we wrap up this chronological journey with these triumphant final details. Nearing the ground, he looks down and he spots these flares dropped by a team member named Luke. These flares perfectly indicate the surface wind direction, allowing him to set up a safe approach. And then, just think about the immense psychological weight of this next moment. He opens his visor and breathes regular, unpressurized Earth air for the very first time after hours and hours locked inside that claustrophobic spacesuit. Surviving the cold, the vacuum, the sound barrier, and a totally deadly 600-mile-per-hour spin, the whole shebang. All of this culminates in executing an absolutely perfect standing touchdown right on the desert floor. A world record holder, safely back on solid ground. We've just seen a person step out into the literal void, shatter the speed of sound, fight off a deadly flat spin, and return safely to the ground. It really forces us to rethink everything we know about human endurance. So I'll leave you with this. If a human body can survive a supersonic freefall from the very edge of space, what absolute limit will we break next? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this sparked your curiosity, and I will see you next time.